What compels a highly ambitious person to seek the very edge of risk? What is the cognitive dissonance that follows success and danger to coexist? And when the end comes without warning, what hidden psychological clues do the final moments leave behind? Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I don't just talk about the crimes. I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. We look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. Today we're examining the tragic and baffling case of an Irish swimwear designer and founder, Martha Nolan. I must emphasize, based on the current public records and reputable sources, no perpetrator has been identified, charged, or profiled in this case. My analysis presented here is not a diagnosis, and it focuses solely on the observable behavioral and situational psychology surrounding the incident, not on a known criminal. Our goal is to dissect the psychological environment and the human behaviors that converged at the time of this tragedy. The psychology of an entrepreneur like Martha Nolan is the foundation of this mystery. At 33, she was an Irish-born designer who had relocated to Manhattan, successfully launching her own resort and swimwear brand. This trajectory demands more than just business acumen. It requires a specific, often extreme psychological makeup. Individuals who pursue high-risk, high-reward careers often display traits of a type A personality, characterized by ambition and a sense of urgency and a powerful internal locus of control. This is a deep-seated belief that they and non-external forces control their destiny. This psychological framework is essential for success, but comes with inherent risk. For Martha, who had just opened a successful pop-up location at a prestigious Gurney's resort in Montauk, and external signs indicated a complete mastery of her environment. Her move from Ireland to the United States required a profound psychological resilience and high tolerance for uncertainty, reinforcing her belief in her own capabilities. This constant stream of success can trigger two significant cognitive indicators. The first indicator is optimism bias. This bias is a belief that one is less likely to experience negative events compared to others. Psychologically, it shields the high achiever from crippling anxiety and allows them to take necessary risk. However, in personal and social situations, it can lead to a dangerous underestimation of external threats. She may have felt safe in an environment she perceived as controlled by her own success and connections. The second indicator is an illusion of control. She may have felt she could manage any situation because she had successfully managed every previous professional challenge. The environment of the Hamptons and the Montauk Yacht Club was one of intense social pressure, wealth, and exclusivity. Psychologically, this setting can create a heightened sense of invulnerability. We have to ask, though, did the very cognitive makeup that fueled her success create blind spots that led her into a situation of elevated risk? Martha was found unconscious on the yacht named the Ripple. The call to emergency service was made around midnight by the yacht owner, a wealthy 60-year-old major investor in her brand. His first definitive action, according to reports, was to claim she was his girlfriend. The scene presents two powerful psychological events. The third indicator here is disorganized panic in the flight response. Witnesses reported seeing the man running for help, naked, in a state of agitation. This isn't just distress. This is a complete breakdown of socialized coping mechanisms. The brain, in extreme shock, reverts to the primal fight, flight, or freeze response. His flight, running for help, was so disorganized that he bypassed all social propriety. He was naked. This signals a massive, overwhelming wave of psychological shock and perhaps an intimate fear of consequence, separate from the medical emergency. This behavior is indicative of a person entirely unprepared for and overwhelmed by the crisis. The fourth indicator here is the immediate need for the narrative control. Even while physically panicked, his cognition quietly engaged in impression management by claiming a romantic relationship. Friends of Martha publicly stated this was false. Why, in a moment of requiring immediate objective action, calling for medical assistance, would a person prioritize establishing a false, intimate relationship? This suggests a deep psychological need to mitigate legal or social scrutiny. A girlfriend dying is a personal tragedy. A young business associate dying on your yacht is a potential professional and legal catastrophe. The use of deception under acute stress is a significant behavioral clue pointing toward a hidden psychological motive, which could be fear, protection of reputation, or deflection. The fact that homicide detectives were immediately called despite the initial lack of violence underscores that law enforcement recognized the psychological inconsistency and behavioral anomalies at the scene. The combination of extreme panic and immediate psychological spin was enough to flag the incident as suspicious. The official police update stating the preliminary investigation was inconclusive, and the autopsy did not show evidence of violence. This creates a profound psychological void for everyone involved, especially her family. Without a clear cause of death, the investigation pivots to toxicology and the psychological factors of the environment. Which leads us to the fifth indicator here. It's a behavioral pursuit of arousal and risk tolerance. Witness told news outlets that Martha was partying the day before. We aren't making a moral judgment here, but analyzing the behavior. The high-octane social activity juxtaposed with intense professional pressure aligns with a pattern of seeking extreme dopamine reward, an often necessary psychological relief valve for high achievers. This pursuit of highs can lead to a high behavioral risk tolerance, where the individual pushes boundaries in their leisure life, just as they do in their professional life. This pattern increases vulnerability, not necessarily by inviting malice, but by increasing the probability of accidental or situational factors leading to tragedy. Her mother, who last spoke to her about a planned trip back home to Harlow, Ireland, was left with the last conversation dominated by Martha's busy schedule. And this leads us to the sixth indicator, ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss is a term coined in family therapy to describe a loss that occurs without certainty or closure. In Martha's case, her family faces a loss that is physically present. She's gone, but psychologically absent. The cause, the story, the truth is unknown. This is the tendency to overestimate one's degree of influence over random events. In a high-stakes setting like the Hamptons, where Martha needed to network and secure investment, this illusion made her comfortable. A successful young entrepreneur like Martha Nolan interacts with a powerful, wealthy investor. We must analyze the psychology of the unequal power. That leads us to the seventh indicator here, psychological pressure for social compliance. The relationship between a young entrepreneur and a 60-year-old major investor is a relationship of unequal financial power. The investor held control over Martha's dreams. The psychological pressure to maintain that relationship, to be constantly on, to accept invitations, and to minimize personal boundaries in a bid for professional advancement, that would have been immense. Martha, driven by her locus of control, likely felt she could manage this pressure, but the cost of non-compliance, losing the investor, was too high. The eighth indicator here is boundary erosion and situational vulnerability. In this high-pressure, intimate environment, a private yacht late at night, those boundaries are easily eroded by the need for compliance and the desire for social reward. This process of boundary erosion leads directly to a situational vulnerability. The isolation of the location amplified this risk, stripping away the social safety nets that usually protect people in public spaces. Psychologically, Martha's ambition created a professional imperative that placed her in a situation where her personal safety was severely compromised. This confluence of factors, extreme professional drive, an environment of instant gratification, an isolated location, and a distinct power gradient is the psychological precursor to many unexplained tragedies in high society settings. Beyond the actions of the people involved, we must consider how the case's initial presentation psychologically affects the police and public perception. When authorities arrived at the scene involving a successful high society individual, even law enforcement is subject to social filtering. This bias causes people to subconsciously minimize or rationalize suspicious circumstances in affluent settings, often defaulting to assumptions of accident or overdose before considering criminal intent. The most compelling psychological clue is the case provides us as immediate shift in the narrative by the yacht owner, a move designed to influence the social filtering process. Let's piece the psychological clues together here and reach the core of the movie's impact. First is the panic and false claim, an urgent psychological defense mechanism used to control perception of the event. Second is the absence of violence. This forces investigators away from the typical whodunit profiling and toward subtle behavioral analysis of situational factors, toxicology, and power dynamics. Third, the drive for reward, Martha's own high-risk tolerance that led her to the place of ultimate vulnerability, an isolated yacht late at night. The aha moment lies in the realization that the mystery is less about the direct attack and more about the perfect psychological storm of circumstance. Martha's incredible success gave her the illusion of control, but led her to an isolated place under conditions of unequal power, where her safety was dependent on the person whose first instinct in a crisis was not medical help, but narrative self-protection. The investigation remains open because the observable psychology of the scene, the panic, the lie, the isolation, it doesn't match the nonviolent conclusion of the autopsy. The psychological evidence contradicts the physical evidence, and that is where the truth must be found. The true focus of this mystery from the psychological perspective is how the circumstance, the ambition, the power, the isolation, and the night's events conspired to create a fatal situation. The investigation into Martha Nolan's death remains open, and her official cause of death is still pending. Until toxicology reports or further evidence is released, we are left analyzing the behavioral and situational psychology of the night. Her case is a profound reminder that even at the height of success, psychological safety and boundaries are paramount. What do you think about Martha's death? How do you think she died? Was it a fatal? Why do you think she went on the yacht so late at night? There's so many unanswered questions that we're left with, and this case is still ongoing. We're probably going to see more evidence unfolding. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, stay curious, stay safe.